here's the thing that you need to consider, the pocket veto. You wonder why he did that. By putting a pocket veto on, he puts it to the side for a while. And by putting it to the side, he can always pick it up later. Do you think he'll pick it up and sign it later after the elections? It's funny what they do before elections. We'll get into that in another show. I was just, on the terrorism end. Kind of funny how it happens right around October 29th. Don't believe me, check 2004. Don't believe me, check 2010, October 29th. Don't believe me. Don't even go there. Okay, so anyway, here's a little video for you. And this is, who repealed Glass-Steagall? Who are the people behind it?
I thought it would be neat to celebrate November 12, 1999 as the biggest financial meltdown in my lifetime and give thanks to the politicians who voted for the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, or the Financial Services Modernization Act of 1999. First, a little background. The Glass-Steagall Act of 1933 established the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation to insure bank deposits and required banks to choose between being a simple lender, a bank, or an underwriter, a brokerage. Here we see at Roosevelt's immediate right and left were Senator Carter Glass of Virginia and Representative Henry Steagall of Alabama, the two most prominent figures in the bill's development. In February 1995, Time magazine published Clinton Proposes Banking Reforms. The Clinton administration proposed sweeping changes in the nation's banking system that would permit commercial banks to sell insurance and underwrite securities. Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin outlined the new proposal, which would allow banks to, quote, affiliate, end quote, with Wall Street firms, insurance companies, and other financial service providers. It would repeal several federal restrictions, including the Depression-era Glass-Steagall Act, which forbids banks from underwriting securities or selling insurance. Banks for years have been seeking a repeal of Glass-Steagall. This United States Treasury Secretary Robert Rubin, and this Robert Rubin, who before his government service spent 26 years at Goldman Sachs serving as a member of the board and co-chairman from 1990 to 1992. Here's Time magazine's 15 February 1999 cover praising Robert Rubin, Larry Summers, and Alan Greenspan, the Committee to Save the World, the inside story of how three marketeers have prevented a global economic meltdown so far. The three marketeers convinced Congress and President Clinton to pass the Commodity Futures Modernization Act of 2000. The act's purpose was to protect credit derivatives from being regulated by the U.S. Commodities Future Trading Commission or the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, protect financial institutions from, quote, overregulation, end quote, and position the United States financial services industry to be world leaders in the new century. Larry Summers, President Clinton's U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, lobbied to repeal the Glass-Steagall Act. That's Secretary Summers on the left. President Obama chose Summers to be his director of the White House National Economic Council. In 1999, Senator Phil Gramm lobbied Republicans and Democrats in Congress to repeal the safeguards which the Glass-Steagall Act enacted. Congresswomen like Nancy Pelosi killed Glass-Steagall. Congressmen like Charles Rangel killed Glass-Steagall. Congressmen like James Clyburn killed Glass-Steagall. Senator Arlen Specter killed Glass-Steagall. Senator Chris Dodd killed Glass-Steagall. Quote, I have been a member of the Senate Banking Committee since the first day I was sworn into the Senate, almost 19 years ago. I think this effort dates to about 1967 or 1968, more than 30 years ago. This has been an ongoing debate and issue on the part of the banking committees of the Senate and the House, the Commerce Committee, and numerous efforts at the executive branch level. But certainly over the last 20 years, on numerous occasions, this body has enacted reforms to financial services only to watch the legislation die. Senator Chuck Schumer killed Glass-Steagall. As a member of the Banking Committee in the House and the Senate, Schumer worked for a decade to pass the 1999 Financial Services Modernization legislation, which modernizes regulations governing the United States banking, securities, and insurance industries. He played a key role in drafting language to ensure that financial companies serve traditionally underserved areas and has exposed unequal lending practices of banks and predatory lending practices of subprime lenders in minority communities. Congressmen like Patrick Kennedy killed Glass-Steagall. Congressman Elijah Cummings killed Glass-Steagall. Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee killed Glass-Steagall. Congressman Steny Hoyer, killed Glass-Steagall. Congressman William Jefferson, killed Glass-Steagall. Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez, killed Glass-Steagall. Congressman Rod Blagojevich, killed Glass-Steagall. Congressman David Bonyer, killed Glass-Steagall. Congressman Lloyd Doggett, killed Glass-Steagall. Congressman Harold Ford, killed Glass-Steagall, as did many Republican senators, congressmen, and congresswomen. In a November 1999 Time magazine article titled Bank on Change, we learn that not everyone is happy. Quote, "This is horrible legislation," end quote, says bank analyst Lawrence Cohn at Ryan Beck and Company. Quote, "It creates a huge potential obligation for U.S. taxpayers," end quote. How's that? Cohn told reporters the new bill would encourage concentration of financial power in a few hands, any of which could topple the system if it failed, forcing a government bailout, which, as we now know, is exactly what happened. On the 12th of November 1999, the Glass-Steagall Act of 1933 was repealed by the Graham-Leach-Bliley Act, or the Financial Services Modernization Act. There's Alan Greenspan. There's Senator Phil Gramm. There's Senator Chris Dodd. Associated Press writer Marcy Gordon wrote an article about the details of the Banking Act Bill Clinton had signed into law in Questions and Answers About Financial Overhaul. Here is the second part of that article. The Associated Press also reported, President signs massive banking bill. In the photo, the President is standing next to Alan Greenspan. Clinton once opposed measure. By Associated Press, Washington. President Clinton signed into law Friday a sweeping measure that knocks down Depression-era barriers and lets banks, investment firms, and insurance companies sell each other's products and provide one-stop shopping for financial services. Quote, "This is a day we can celebrate as an American day," end quote, Clinton said at the signing ceremony in a White House auditorium. The audience of lawmakers and senior government officials included Federal Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan. Praising Congress's bipartisan support for the legislation, Clinton said it is a victory for both free markets and consumer protection. The law will help, quote, "make sure that the 21st century economy really works for our country," end quote, the President said. Clinton opposed similar legislation for years, but recently dropped his veto threat after changes were made. Congress passed the law November 5 to open the way for a blossoming of financial, quote, "supermarkets," end quote, that sell loans, investments, and insurance. Proponents pushed the legislation in Congress for 2 decades, and Wall Street and the banking and insurance industries poured millions of dollars into lobbying for it in the past few years. At stake is an estimated $350 billion that Americans spend annually on fees and commissions for banking, brokerage, and insurance services. Proponents say the legislation will save customers $15 billion a year, offering them greater choice and convenience and spurring competition. Consumer groups and other opponents maintain it will bring higher prices and jeopardize people's financial privacy. On the 24th of October 1999, the New York Times published Stephen Lobatin's report, Deal on Bank Bill Was Helped Along by Midnight Talks. At a fundraiser at Senator Edward M. Kennedy's home, here shortly after 6 o'clock on Thursday evening, President Clinton asked one of his closest friends in the Senate, Christopher J. Dodd of Connecticut, how the talks were going with Republicans over the most important financial legislation since the Great Depression. Mr. Dodd was not optimistic about the bill, which had reached the point of do or die. After 4 days of bitter polemic between Senator Phil Gramm, the Texas Republican who is chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, and administration officials, the two sides were stuck over highly symbolic and racially tinged community lending rules that threatened to rip the legislation apart. The discussions had become so poisoned by Thursday night that Mr. Gramm threatened both the top White House economic advisor, Gene Sperling, and the head of the nation's largest financial services company, Citigroup, that he would pull the plug on the bill, something neither the administration nor Wall Street wanted. Time magazine published a special report titled 25 People to Blame for the Financial Crisis. As chairman of the Senate Banking Committee from 1995 through 2000, Graham was Washington's most prominent and outspoken champion of financial deregulation. He played a leading role in writing and pushing through Congress the 1999 repeal of the Depression-era Glass-Steagall Act, which separated commercial banks from Wall Street. He also inserted a key provision into the 2000 Commodity Futures Modernization Act that exempted over-the-counter derivatives like credit default swaps from regulation by the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. Credit default swaps took down AIG, which has cost the United States $150 billion thus far. Time magazine continues. President Clinton's tenure was characterized by economic prosperity and financial deregulation, which in many ways set the stage for the excesses of recent years. Among his biggest strokes of freewheeling capitalism was the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, which repealed the Glass-Steagall Act, a cornerstone of Depression-era regulation. He also signed the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, which exempted credit default swaps from regulation. In 1995, Clinton loosened housing rules by rewriting the Community Reinvestment Act, which put added pressure on banks to lend in low-income neighborhoods. It is the subject of heated political and scholarly debate whether any of these moves are to blame for our troubles, but they certainly played a role in creating a permissive lending environment.
Rather interesting, huh? Now you learned about some bankers and some politicians, and how they didn't work for you, the people they supposedly represented, did they? And it's not that we have a bad form of government, we have an excellent form of government. We just have criminals, in this case, global banking cartels, foreign bankers taking over, co-opting our government, let alone our form of government. Now you'll understand why they're putting a police state in place, because they have to cover their exits. And this isn't the beginning of the ripoff. You watch what they do to your pension plans next, because that's the next pool of money they can go grab it after. And I know it's maybe hard to understand everything that I just said. Maybe what you want to consider is, here's a little 3-minute piece on how the whole world financial thing's collapsing. Here you go.
Time now for John Clark and Brian Dorr with a few reflections on Europe's financial woes.
Your name is Roger, yes?
Roger.
Ah, that's your name.
Roger.
Good. And what do you do, Roger?
I'm a financial consultant.
Ah, financial consultant, eh?
Roger,
Yeah,
yes.
Terrific. And Roger, how's business at the moment?
Not bad, thank you. Been a bit quiet lately.
How do you mean lately?
Since the war, been a bit quiet.
Fair enough. Okay, Roger, your special subject tonight is the economies of the European community. Your time starts now. Best of luck.
Thank you.
How much does Greece owe, Roger?
$367 billion.
Correct. And who do they owe it to?
Mostly to the other European economies.
Correct. How much does Ireland owe?
$865 billion.
Correct. And who do they owe it to?
Other European economies, mostly.
Correct. How much do Spain and Italy owe?
$1 trillion each.
Correct. Who to?
Mainly France, Britain and Germany.
Correct. And how are Germany, France and Britain going, Roger?
Well, they're struggling a bit, aren't they?
Correct. Why?
Because they've lent all these vast amounts of money to other European economies that can't possibly pay them back.
Correct. So what are they going to do?
They're going to have to bail them out.
Correct. Where are they getting the money to do that, Roger?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that one.
How much does Portugal owe?
Hang on a minute. What was the answer to that earlier question?
Just keep answering the questions, Roger. Where is Portugal going to get the money it owes to Germany if Germany can't get back the money that it lent to Italy?
Just a minute. What was the answer to the previous question? The question was, how can broke economies lend money to other broke economies who haven't got any money because they can't pay back the money the broke economy lent to the other broke economy and shouldn't have lent it to them in the first place because the broke economy can't pay it back?
You're wasting very valuable time, Roger. How much money does Spain owe to Italy?
$41 billion, but where are they going to get it?
Correct. What does Italy owe to Spain?
$27 billion, but they haven't got it. They're broke.
Correct. How can they pay each other if neither of them has any money?
They're going to get a bailout, aren't they?
Correct. And where's the money coming from for the bailout?
That's what I'm asking you.
Correct. Why are people selling the European currency and buying the US dollar?
Because the US economy is so much stronger than the European economy.
Correct. Why is that, Roger?
Because it's owned by China.
Correct. And very well done. And after that round, you've lost $1 million.
I've lost $1 million. I thought you said well done.
Yes, well done. You've only lost $1 million. That's an extraordinary performance,
I've
Roger.
only lost $1 million.
Very well done.
And that's quite good, is it?
Oh, it's excellent.
Sell everything immediately. Quickly.
I think it's called laughing as you sink.